Hey everybody, and welcome back to another episode. It is Wednesday, and today we're going to be talking about some interesting benefits of learning related languages. This is another one of those episodes where I'm going to be sharing some interesting observations from my own experience learning lots of languages over the last 10 plus years. So let's jump into the episode. So I want to take you back to the year of 2013. Now, I was living in Japan at this time. I was doing all my whole life in Japanese, basically, my job, my classes at university, everything. And so that's when I began learning French. Now, at this time, I had been learning Spanish for a number of years, and I wasn't actively learning Spanish anymore because Japanese was my big focus. But Spanish was this language that I could communicate in, but it was very mediocre. I think my listening comprehension in particular was very, very bad. I was able to speak and sound pretty good. People would often think, oh, you're pretty fluent. But my comprehension skills were honestly terrible. So I've been focusing on Japanese. My Japanese at this point was very, very strong. I had already worked as an interpreter and many other things that we've discussed on the channel. But I want you to focus on this fact that my Spanish comprehension was very bad. Now, I began learning French, and this was really the moment where I began getting interested in the sort of polyglot space, where it was no longer about just a love for a single language like Japanese, but now I was starting to fall in love with the art of learning languages and the many, many layers and interesting things that came along with it. Now, on this channel, many of you will have seen my progress in French because I made a video, my sort of 18-minute documentary about my life in Japan and sort of finding home, and that was the first time I had sort of spoken French on the channel. And then, you know, later on that year, I actually made another video in French where I was speaking about trying to achieve a native-like vocabulary, and I was talking all in French, about my methods for using documentaries and movies, and, my French progressed very, very quickly. Now, the really interesting thing that happened that I want to tell you about today is that after I had reached a very high level in French, I went to the Polyglot conference in Serbia, which was an amazing time. That was sort of later in 2014, and the craziest thing happened. I realized my Spanish comprehension had suddenly leapt to much higher levels than I'd ever been before. So at this conference, there were so many people speaking Spanish because I guess a lot of the attendees of the conference, Spanish was one of the most popular languages. German was very popular, French was very popular, but Spanish really jumped out to me because I was hearing so much Spanish, but I also was understanding most of it. It seemed like my Spanish it was so unbelievable because I had not been studying Spanish at all. If anything, I expected my Spanish to have gotten a lot worse. But through learning French, which of course is very closely related, somehow my Spanish comprehension had dramatically improved. And although it is logical, I guess, but I don't think that this is an obvious thing, and I don't think it's something people often think about. If anything, you're often sort of discouraged from, learning related languages in close succession, certainly learning several of them at the same time. But in my case, this was a very, very interesting moment in my language learning journey where I realized through learning a related language like French, my Spanish had actually dramatically improved. And so it was after that later on that I decided to dive back into Spanish. And once again, I found that I was able to dramatically increase my Spanish speaking skills, again, through the benefits of having learned French. And of course, after that, learning Italian and Portuguese, which I did kind of at the same time. Again, that was highly not recommended, and people often said things like you risk permanent interference, and I got a lot of different comments like that. But I went ahead and did it, and I treated that as almost like a comparative analysis where I was constantly comparing the different languages that I knew. And again, I'm just focusing today on these interesting benefits that I saw, which was that they seemed to reinforce each other, and I was able to do this constant comparison. And since our brain works very heavily through association, to create memories, I was constantly making these interesting associations. Now, of course, in the beginning, when my language skills were very basic and not very advanced, I did confuse the languages quite a bit, but I just knew that, you know, as I would get more and more advanced in each language, this would happen less and less. And so, yeah, the interesting focus here for this first sort of unexpected benefit that I got from learning related languages was that, yes, through learning French, I also increased my Spanish dramatically. And I think one of the keys here is that I already did speak Spanish to a point, but again, it was, you know, pretty mediocre, and my comprehension in particular was very bad. And so as someone who does input-based learning and as someone who primarily focuses on improving my comprehension skills before really focusing on speaking, it was a real delight. It was a real pleasure to discover one day, oh my God, my Spanish comprehension skills are so much better than they were last time I looked. Now, the second really interesting benefit for learning related languages that I want to talk about today is maintaining them. So not only, of course, do you get this benefit of learning languages more easily when they are related, but it also makes your life a lot easier when you're maintaining them. And so what I found is that even after I stopped speaking French a whole lot, and I was really doing a lot of, let's say Italian actually. So I found that my Spanish would atrophy very little, even though I actually was not speaking Spanish very much for quite a long time, because I was doing a lot of French and I was doing a lot of Italian for a while. And so again, I was able to sort of maintain each different language very much via association with these other related languages. Whereas with Japanese, for example, it was very difficult to maintain. Now, it did help, of course, that I had a very high level in Japanese. And as discussed in the last episode, because I had so many very deep, intrinsically sort of like inspirational, positive life experiences with Japanese, that helped me to maintain it over the years. But the biggest challenge was that none of my other languages were in any way related. Just so many characteristics of Japanese that really were just like on their own and had to be maintained as such. And so, you know, there were other benefits to having learned languages in different families and that are very far apart, but those were two just like really interesting benefits. I think the first one in particular was really quite a surprise to me. And again, I think it's fairly obvious that yes, if you learn French to a really high level, then, you know, learning Italian afterwards will be a lot easier. But again, the fact that I was just improving my Spanish, like without realizing it, it was very, very interesting. So maybe this will help you to make some decisions for yourself. I would love to hear from all of you with your own experiences learning related languages. And certainly in a future video, I might touch on this topic of, you know, learning multiple languages at the same time, but specifically, you know, learning related languages at the same time, because this is quite a hot topic and it's generally not recommended, I think. But, you know, I did this very successfully and it was very interesting. So yes, I'd love to get your thoughts. And with that, I'll see you back here on Friday. And I'm really excited about Friday's episode. So make sure you come back, don't miss it. And, you know, have a good day.